I'm Jeremy. Today's day 400 of reading, trading Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix. Let's get started. Wow, day 400. We're currently on page 291. Let's go. Going to start with some passes just to warm up. The whole team, please. Hey, Johnson, what's with that hairstyle anyway? Shrieked Pansy Parkinson from below. Why would anyone want to look like they've got worms coming out of their head? Angelina swept her long braided hair out of her face and said calmly, "Spread out then, and let's see what we can do." Harry reversed away from the others to the far side of the pitch. Ron fell back toward the opposite goal. Angelina raised the quaffle with one hand and threw it hard to Fred, who passed to George, who passed to Harry, who passed to Ron, who dropped it. The Slytherins, led by Malfoy, roared and screamed with laughter. Ron, who had pelted toward the ground to catch the quaffle before it landed, pulled out of the dive untidily, so that he slipped sideways on his broom and returned to playing height, blushing. Harry saw Fred and George exchange looks, but uncharacteristically neither of them said anything for which he was grateful. "Pass it on, Ron," called Angelina, as though nothing had happened. Ron threw the quaffle to Alicia, who passed back to Harry, who passed to George. "Hey, Potter, how's your scar feeling?" called Malfoy. "Sure you don't need a lie down? It must be. What, a whole week since you were down in the hospital wing? That's a record for you, isn't it?" Fred passed to Angelina. She reversed past to Harry, who had not been expecting it, but caught it at the very tips of his finger and passed it quickly to Ron, who lunged for it and missed by inches. "Come on now, Ron," said Angelina crossly as Ron dived for the ground again, chasing the quaffle. "Pay attention." It would have been hard to say whether Ron's face or the quaffle was a deeper scarlet when he returned again to the playing height. Malfoy and the rest of the Slytherin team were howling with laughter. On his third attempt, Ron caught the quaffle, perhaps out of relief. He passed it on so enthusiastically that it soared straight through Katie's outstretched hands and hit her hard in the face. "Sorry," Ron groaned, zooming forward to see whether he had done any damage. "Get back in position. She's fine," barked Angelina. "But as you're passing to a teammate, try not to knock her off her broom, won't you? We've got bludgers for that." Katie's nose was bleeding. Down below, the Slytherins were stamping their foot and jeering. Fred and George converged on Katie. "Here, take this," Fred told her, handing her something small and purple from out of his pocket. "It'll clear it up in no time." "All right," called Angelina. "Fred, George, go and get your bats and a bludger. Ron, get up to the goalposts. Harry, release the snitch when I say so. We're going to aim for Ron's goal, obviously." Harry zoomed off after the twins to fetch the snitch. "Ron's making a right pig's ears of things, isn't he?" muttered George as the three of them landed at the crate containing the balls and opened it to extract one of the bludgers and the snitch. "He's just nervous," said Harry. "He was fine when I was practicing with him this morning." "Yeah, well, I hope he hasn't peaked too soon," said Fred gloomily. They returned to the air. When Angelina blew her whistle, Harry released the snitch, and Fred and George let fly the bludger. From that moment on, Harry was barely aware of what the others were doing. It was his job to recapture the tiny fluttering golden ball that was worth 150 points to the Seekers team, and doing so required enormous speed and skill. He accelerated, rolling and swerving in and out of the chasers, the warm autumn air whipping his face, and the distant yells of the Slytherins so much meaningless roaring in his ears. But too soon, the whistle brought him to a halt again. "Stop, stop, stop!" screamed Angelina. "Ron, you're not covering your middle post." Harry looked around at Ron, who was hovering in front of the left-hand hoop, leaving the other two completely unprotected. "Oh, sorry." "You keep shifting around while you're watching the chasers," said Angelina. "Either stay in the center position until you have to move to defend a hoop, or else circle the hoops, but don't drift vaguely off to one side. That's how you let in the last 3 goals." "Sorry," Ron repeated, his red face shining like a beacon against the bright blue sky. "And Katie, can't you do something about that nosebleed?" "It's just getting worse," said Katie sickly, attempting to stem the flow with her sleeve. Harry glanced around at Fred, who was looking anxious and checking his pockets. He saw Fred pull out something purple, examine it for a second, and then look around at Katie, evidently horror-struck. "Well, let's try again," said Angelina. She was ignoring the Slytherins, who had now set up a chant of "Gryffindors are losers, Gryffindors are losers," but there was a certain rigidity about her seat on the broom nevertheless. This time they had been flying for barely 3 minutes when Angelina's whistle sounded. Harry, who had just sighted a snitch circling the opposite goal post, pulled up, feeling distinctly aggrieved. "What now?" he said impatiently to Alicia, who was nearest. "Katie," she said shortly. Harry turned and saw Angelina, Fred, and George all flying as fast as they could toward Katie. Harry and Alicia sped toward her, too. It was plain that Angelina had stopped training just in time. Katie was now chalk white and covered in blood. She needs the hospital wing," said Angelina. "We'll take her," said Fred. She might have swallowed a blood blister pod by mistake." "Well, there's no point continuing with no beaters and a chaser gone," said Angelina glumly, as Fred and George zoomed off toward the castle, supporting Katie between them. "Come on, let's go and get changed." The students continued to chant as they trailed back into the changing rooms. "How was practice?" said Hermione rather coolly half an hour later, as Harry and Ron climbed through the porthole into the Gryffindor common room. "It was," Harry began. "Completely lousy," said Ron in a hollow voice, sinking into a chair beside Hermione. She looked up at Ron and her frostiness seemed to melt. "Well, it was only your first one," she said consolingly. "It's bound to take time to—" "Who said it was me who made it lousy?" snapped Ron. "No one," said Hermione, looking taken aback. You thought I was bound to be rubbish?" "No, of course I didn't. Look, you said it was lousy, so I'm going to get started on some homework," said Ron angrily, and stomped off to the staircase to the boys' dormitories and vanished from sight. Hermione turned to Harry. "Was he lousy?" "No," said Harry loyally. Hermione raised her eyebrows. "Well, I suppose he could have played better," Harry muttered, "but it was only the first training session, like you said." Neither Harry nor Ron seemed to make much headway with their homework that night. Harry knew Ron was too preoccupied with how badly he had performed at Quidditch practice, and he himself was having a difficulty in getting the chant of "Gryffindors are losers" out of his head. They spent the whole of Sunday in the common room, buried in their books while the room around them filled up, then emptied. It was another clear, fine day, and most of their fellow Gryffindors spent the day out in the grounds, enjoying what might as well be some of the last sunshine of that year. By the evening, Harry felt as though somebody had beaten his brain against the inside of his skull. "We probably should try and get more homework done during the week," Harry muttered to Ron as they finally laid aside Professor McGonagall's long essay on Inanimatus Conjurer's spell and turned miserably to Professor Sinistra's equally long and difficult essay about Jupiter's moons. "Yeah," said Ron, rubbing slightly bloodshot eyes and throwing his fifth spoiled bit of parchment into the fire beside them. "Listen, shall we just ask Hermione if we can have a look at what she's done?" Harry glanced over at her. She was sitting with Crookshanks on her lap and chatting merrily to Ginny as a pair of knitting needles flashed in midair in front of her, now knitting a pair of shapeless elf socks. "No," he said heavily. "You know she won't let us." And so they worked on while the sky outside the windows became steadily darker. Slowly, the crowd in the common room began to thin again. At 11:30, Hermione wandered over to them, yawning. "Nearly done?" "No," said Ron shortly. "Jupiter's biggest moon is Ganymede, not Callisto," she said, pointing over Ron's shoulder at a line in his astronomy essay. "And it's Io that's got the moons." "Thanks," snarled Ron, scratching out the offending sentences. "Sorry, Yeah, well, if you've just come over here to criticize—" "Ron, I haven't got time to listen to a sermon, all right, Hermione? I'm up to my neck in it here." "No, look!" Hermione was... Thank you, everyone. That's all for today. Bye. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to read page 296. Bookmark, close. Peace out.